I remember the winter my grandmother came to stay with us. She had never seen snow before. When she stepped out of the airport, she stood still, eyes wide, watching flakes melt against her skin like they were pieces of magic. She laughed then, quietly, saying the cold air here smelled different. To her, everything about America felt strange. The silence of the streets, the empty yards, the way people lived in their own little boxes. Back home, house and island, she said, privacy. Life was the opposite. Walls were thin, laughter was shared, and neighbors could hear the sound of your pot boiling from across the compound. There, you didn't need to knock. Everyone already knew who was inside, what they were cooking, and how happy or sad they were. She said it softly, but there was a hint of sadness in her voice, as if she missed that closeness, even with all its chaos. One evening, while we sat by the heater, listening to the wind scrape across the windows, she told me something that made my skin prickle. A story she said she had kept locked away for many years. That closeness, she whispered, it wasn't always a blessing. Sometimes people knew too much about each other, and when hearts turned dark, there was nowhere to hide. She leaned closer then, her wrinkled hands clasped together as if remembering something painful. The room felt colder. The only light came from the orange flicker of the heater's coils. It happened long ago, she said, in a crowded building where I once lived, the kind where everyone shared a kitchen, a bathroom, a courtyard, where you could smell what each person was cooking and hear what they whispered behind their doors. She paused, her eyes unfocused, lost in a memory. I lost a good neighbor there, she continued. Someone kind, someone who didn't deserve what happened. The air in the room seemed to shift when she said those words. I felt it, that strange heaviness people describe when a story stops being just a story. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Every word carried something older than fear. I learned that in some places, she said, the dead don't always rest when the living are guilty. Sometimes they come back for what's theirs. That was the night she told me about the gate and why no one in that building ever looked at it again. Have you ever been told a story that felt too real to be just a story? Would you want to hear the rest if you knew it was true? My grandmother's voice softened when she reached this part, like she was afraid the story might wake something if told too loudly. Outside, the storm pressed against our windows, but her words were heavier than the thunder. The building was always full of life, she said once. Children shouting, radios playing, pots clanging, people arguing. Everyone knew everyone else's business. You could never hide your joy or your shame. It was the kind of compound where every apartment faced the other. One long corridor, one shared kitchen, one giant pot of secrets. If one person cooked, everyone knew what was on the fire. If two people quarreled, the whole neighborhood took sides. Among those early tenants were two young women, both newly married, both eager to make a home. For a while, they were inseparable, laughing, helping each other with chores, sharing food. But something small broke between them. No one could even say what it was. A missing bowl, a rude comment, a rumor whispered in the wrong ear. Whatever it was, it grew. There's nothing more dangerous than a quiet grudge. Grandma used to say, it doesn't make noise, but it listens. It waits. Soon, the two women stopped speaking. They avoided each other in the courtyard, in the kitchen, in the well. The air between them turned sharp. Even the other neighbors could feel it. One afternoon, one of the women was in the shared kitchen. Her husband had traveled, and she wanted to surprise him with a good meal when he returned. She cooked with care, stirring, humming softly, adding spices from the small tins she'd bought at the market. The kitchen was empty, or so she thought. Someone else slipped in later, someone who still carried the bitterness of those old arguments, and something else hidden under her wrapper. By the time she left, the air in that kitchen had changed. The young woman finished her food, smiled to herself, and ate. By nightfall, her laughter had turned into choking. Her cries filled the courtyard. The neighbors ran out, banging on doors, calling her husband's name. But by the time he arrived, she was already gone, her body still warm, her hands clutching her stomach, as though holding onto life that refused to stay. She died that same night, Grandma said, her voice barely a whisper, and with her, her unborn child. If you shared your kitchen with someone you once trusted, would you ever leave your food unattended? If you see what you're not supposed to see, Grandma would whisper, "Don't blink, just walk away, fast." Her eyes met mine then, and she said something I never forgot. A soul that dies unjustly doesn't wander, it waits. Would you live in a house where a spirit guards the gate? If you knew someone's ghost was still seeking justice, would you stay or move away? And if you heard footsteps before dawn, would you look outside? They say the dead don't rise, but in that building, after her burial, no one slept again. It started 3 days after she was laid in the earth. The morning had barely broken when someone screamed. A man found his brother dead, right at the gate. He looked like he had seen something so terrifying his eyes were still open, but there were no wounds, no blood, just fear frozen on his face. At first, everyone thought it was just grief or coincidence, but the next morning, another body, and the next, always at the gate, always at dawn. The air grew heavy. She waited there every dawn, and every time someone from her killer's family tried to step out, she struck. No one saw her move. No one saw her touch them. They just dropped, like their souls were yanked away. By the 4th day, people stopped leaving the building before sunrise, but it didn't matter. She had already marked them. I remember my grandmother saying, no one could pass that gate without feeling her eyes on them, that even birds avoided perching there. Then, one morning, she didn't just wait at the gate. She came in. They say she walked the corridor slowly, dragging her feet, whispering a name no one dared repeat. And when she reached the killer's door, the lock opened on its own. That was the last anyone heard from that room until screams tore through the building. By the time neighbors forced the door open, they found her, the killer, kneeling, shaking, pointing to the doorway. She confessed right there, begging the spirit to stop, begging for her life. The spirit disappeared after that, just gone, but no one stayed in that building for long. They said the gate still felt cold at dawn, as if she still stood there, waiting. If justice came from beyond the grave, would you still call it justice? Do you believe the dead can choose who to haunt, or do they come for everyone who's guilty? If she had forgiven instead of avenged, would she have found peace, or remained forgotten? What would you do if someone you wronged stood waiting for you at dawn? By the time police arrived, there was nothing left of the haunting only silence and the scent of burnt candles. The woman who had confessed could barely speak. Her lips trembled as she kept muttering the same words again and again. She was waiting for me. At the gate, she knows my name. When they asked who she meant, she just pointed to the empty corridor, and everyone who looked there said the same thing. It felt like someone was standing there. The officers took her away, and the rest of the tenants left the same night. No one wanted to stay, but the gate stayed open, always open. Even when locked, it would creak at dawn like someone unseen still left or returned each morning. The officers took her away, and the rest of the tenants left the same night. No one wanted to stay, but the gate stayed open, always open. Even when locked, it would creak at dawn like someone unseen still left or returned each morning. Children who grew up nearby told stories about seeing a woman standing outside before sunrise, always at the same spot. Sometimes she wept, sometimes she just watched. And every few years, someone would whisper that another person had fallen ill after touching that gate. The story became a warning. Never walk past that building before dawn. Never step through that gate without saying a prayer. Some say if you listen closely, you can hear her whispering to her unborn child, as if still trying to soothe it. Even after the building was demolished, they say the ground never felt right. Workers reported tools falling on their own, and one night watchman swore he saw a shadow walking the empty lot, stopping right where the old gate used to stand. My grandmother said justice had been served, but at a price, because vengeance always leaves something behind, a stain, a hunger, a doorway that never fully closes. And that's how people began calling it the Gate of the Dead, a place where grief and guilt still meet every morning at 5. Don't forget me. Do you think vengeance ever ends, or does it just change form? Would you live in a house if you knew something once haunted it? What if you found a gate that never stayed closed? Would you dare to touch it? Can places remember pain the same way people do? Years passed. The building where it all happened was torn down. The street was renamed. New apartments rose where pain had once lived. People moved in, students, workers, young couples. No one remembered the stories anymore. But on the corner where the old gate once stood, the construction team found something buried deep in the soil, a rusted iron hinge, twisted and broken. They threw it away with the rubble, and that was their first mistake. The first sign came with a noise, a knocking sound, every morning at 5. One of the residents said it was just the pipes. Another said it was the wind. But soon, they all started hearing it. Sometimes from the front door, sometimes from the walls. A young couple living on the ground floor said they often woke up to find the entrance gate swinging open. Security cameras showed nothing. No one entering, no one leaving. Then came the dreams. Residents described seeing a woman standing by the gate, holding something wrapped in white cloth. She never spoke. She just stared. At first, they thought it was shared delusion, stress, exhaustion, urban paranoia. Until one night, the caretaker found footprints leading across the wet pavement. Bare feet, small ones, like a child's. Every 5 o'clock a.m., the knocking returned, and by dawn, lights would flicker, food would spoil, and cold air would seep under doors. One woman swore she saw her reflection moving out of sync, like something else was behind her, pretending to be her. No one connected it to the old story until an old woman came visiting her granddaughter who lived in that building. She felt uneasy the moment she saw the gate. When she touched it, she whispered, "This metal remembers." By the time the neighbors heard her scream, it was too late. She was gone. No one saw her leave. But her slippers were found right there, at the gate. After that night, the knocking stopped. For months, the building was quiet again, until one morning, a tenant left early for work and saw something. A woman standing by the new security gate, barefoot, watching. He called out, but she didn't move. Then she turned her head slowly and smiled. He said her eyes were hollow, completely black. That tenant moved out the next day. Others followed. Eventually, the building emptied again. People said it was because of rent, but we know better. Some doors were never meant to be opened twice. Would you move into an apartment if you knew it was built on cursed ground? Have you ever heard unexplained knocks in your home at the same time every night? Do you think a place can hold memories strong enough to haunt the living? If you saw her standing by your gate, would you look away or ask who she was? I never believed the story. Not really. I grew up hearing bits of it, told by older people who spoke in hushed tones, saying you should never walk near the old quarter before dawn. They said a woman once stood here, that she waited by a gate for those who owed her blood. But that building's long gone now. In its place stands a row of quiet apartments and a new iron gate that opens to a courtyard full of cars. I came here because I wanted to know if any part of it was true. I came alone at 5 in the morning, the time they said she appeared. The air was cold, the street empty, and then I asked the now occupants of the building about the story behind the house, and that I came to verify. A young black man smiled at me and confirmed to me I heard same story of this our building, but the ghost I think has fully taken her revenge, and her soul is now appeased. Some appeasement was on the land by the previous landlord, and the building brought down and re-erected and sold to a real estate company, who now brought me in as a tenant here. Hence, since I and other tenants moved in, nothing strange has disturbed us. He hugged me and confessed, said to me, "I am so impressed that you took this journey to my country, though your maternal home, just to verify this story." I was glad I went there. I touched the new gate and smiled. I went to my maternal countryside, but as at this time, Grandma was already gone, dead and buried, as this visit 18 years after Grandma visited Minnesota, where she told me this story. Would you visit a place rumored to be haunted just to prove the story wrong? If you heard knocking behind you, would you turn or keep walking? Do you think the dead stop haunting when they get revenge or when they're remembered?